The National Association of Realtors just released an AI policy for real estate brokerages. In this video, we're going to cover what you need to know. Now, first thing, keep in mind, this policy is recommended, it isn't required, but I believe it reveals for both real estate agents and real estate brokers what NAR considers safe and compliant AI use. So I have the NAR AI policy template here pulled up on my screen, and we'll just review and discuss what I think are some of the key points or takeaways that we can glean from this document. The idea, I think, behind this document is that as a real estate brokerage, you can review this, you can refine it, kind of tweak it to make it your own, because they've got a section here for the brokerage name and the effective date. So let's go through and look at the different parts that I've highlighted and talk about them. So the first thing to point out here is in the purpose of scope, AI is all AI, right? Or at least in terms of this document, when NAR is talking about AI, it's talking about generative AI. It's talking about any use of a large language model such as ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini. It's talking about agentic AI and even including machine learning. And so all forms of AI, whether you're just chatting with ChatGPT or if you have advanced implementations and workflows, all of these fall under this policy's domain in terms of what are the things that we're talking about when it's talking about AI. There's some definitions here, but I'm going to scroll down to what I think is some of the key points here. Now, the first thing we're going to see here is NAR suggests that the brokerage shall designate an AI Oversight Lead. So basically, they're recommending that every firm have an AI czar in charge of all activities. Now, I think for most firms, by default, this is the broker. And if you're a larger organization, you might have someone who's designated. But I think the key point here, what's very important to understand, is if you're going to be effective at having someone oversee how AI is being used and whether it's conforming to any kind of policy, it's going to require two things in real estate. It's going to require, one, that the person really have a strong practical understanding of AI and its uses and its implications of use, right? They have to have a high AI fluency. And the other thing is they have to understand real estate, because we have to understand that intersection between what the compliance standards are going to be, what the rules, what the regulations, what the, the code of ethics, all of these things that we would be concerned about in real estate, we have to be aware of as well and where those things meet. Now, in the next bullet point, it says that all AI use cases must be approved by that AI Oversight Lead, which, that's going to be a pretty big undertaking for any individual to actually understand and to be able to approve all of those potential AI use cases. It's just going to be very time consuming, because when you think about everything from just, you sitting there typing into ChatGPT and having a conversation with it that might be related to a client or a transaction or doing some of your marketing or whatever you're doing, right, as it relates to your work, all the way down to building out those more advanced use cases where there might be workflows, there might be automation software, right? It might be interacting with your CRM or transaction management. And so that's a pretty advanced and complex use case, and there might be changing requirements or it may evolve. So being able to just stay on top of all those changes, whoever's in charge of AI has a pretty big job and task ahead of them if they're going to take this role seriously. Now, in most cases, that's going to be a real estate broker. But I think what's important too is that tells me, if I'm like a real estate agent at a real estate firm or a real estate brokerage, what that tells me is what are the things that I also need to be aware of. I should be thinking with seriousness the type of AI or the use cases that I'm using and understand what is effective use of it, not just effective use, but also compliant use, because the last thing I want to do is use AI in a way that's going to get me in trouble. And later on in this document, there's a lot more information that we zero in on compliance and rules and regulations as the types of things we need to attend to. Now, the next point here, it says that human review is mandatory for any AI-generated content. I think this is a very increasing need, is to make sure that pretty much everything that you're producing using AI, especially as a licensed professional that is client-facing, anything that you're using AI for should have your human review on it before it goes in front of a client or prospect or goes out onto your website or onto social media. And so this document or this policy lists out several different specific things. So it says, if it's published on a listing, if you're using AI to publish information about a listing, if it's being sent to a client or consumer, if it's used in marketing or advertising materials, if it's included in transaction documents or disclosures, or even used in property valuation and CMA, like there needs to be, if there's any AI assistance that humans must, or you must review. So when we're talking about human review is mandatory, we're talking about your review is mandatory before it goes out on any of these things, which is pretty much all of the things that we would probably want to use AI for. Scrolling down a little bit, we see that the brokerage shall maintain audit logs of AI system usage. Now, again, whether it's a brokerage or you as an individual real estate agent that's using this, an audit log is keeping track of all of the things that AI is doing. And it says here specifically where feasible. Now, I zero in on this comment because there are certain times when this is feasible. So let me give you an example of what a use case might look like. Let's say you have information that you are updating in a spreadsheet and you happen to be using ChatGPT to do those updates or to make those changes. Well, if you're using a spreadsheet tool like Google Sheets, then there is automatically a log that is maintained of every interaction, of every update that's happening, of every edit that is happening. Now, let's say you are using ChatGPT and it's somehow connected to maybe your CRM. That CRM, likely your CRM provider has an audit log of all the changes that are taking place, but you as the user may not have access to it. It may not be visible to you. So I don't know whether it's feasible then to have something basic like my AI or my ChatGPT connected to my CRM. Does that require an audit log? Is that audit log available to me? Or is that something that's that I would have to request and maybe the CRM provider may not even make it available to me? So that's something to consider. That's saying that a broker should do it. But again, we're trying to keep in mind, what are the requirements? What are the recommendations that the National Association of Realtors is making for us to have safe and compliant AI use? And having an audit log of what you're using AI to do and the actual changes and edits and things that it's creating and making needs to be stored somewhere is what they're suggesting. All right, let's keep scrolling down into the security and data protection section. It says here, agents and staff must not use personal accounts or consumer-grade AI tools. This includes free ChatGPT. So what they're saying is that if you're using free ChatGPT to do anything, that's probably not a good idea. And so what this tells me, this suggests one is that, does this mean that as a broker that you should be providing accounts to your agents? I don't know. I know that there are team and enterprise accounts for all of these AI platforms, but there's significant costs there as well. Now, I think it's very important, like I said, if you're using the free ChatGPT, that you should be aware. Not to say that you can't use them, but NAR is flagging that as a risk. So keep in mind, NAR considers using the free version of ChatGPT, or probably any free version of any AI tool is a bit of a risk. Okay, let's keep scrolling down to the MLS data protection section. It says here, AI-generated listing descriptions must comply with MLS accuracy standards. Keep moving down here. Client data protections. I highlighted this: never enter a client social security number. Not that you would enter that into ChatGPT, but you want to make sure that any document that passes through there doesn't happen to have any kind of sensitive information in there. So it's not going to just be the social security information, but really anything that is sensitive. Could be financial records, could be information that identifies that individual or their family members, or whatever the case may be. Anything that's sensitive shouldn't be fed into the AI tool, or at least it should be scrubbed out, right? You can redact the information and remove it so that it's not getting into the system. It also says client communications generated by AI must be reviewed before sending them out. We kind of touched on this. I'm going to actually zero in on this a little bit more, this concept of being reviewed, of you reviewing the output of AI. And I would say go past review. It is important that when you are reviewing it, you're actually editing the AI. Because one of the things that I've noticed, and we'll get into more detail around this later in the video, is that there are some pretty negative consequences that happen when someone detects that you are using AI in any capacity to interact with them. All right, scrolling down here, we see we've got the plugins and agentic AI. Keep in mind, agentic AI is when you're using AI in a more autonomous fashion. You have AI agents that might be working in the background, or they are doing more steps. They might be doing just more steps instead of a single chat type experience that we all know and are familiar with ChatGPT, or rather we have it performing activities for us more autonomously. Now, what it's saying is agentic systems may not perform activities that require a real estate license. In order for us to make sure that AI is not performing activities that require a real estate license, we have to review all of the AI output and the steps that it's taking to confirm that it's not performing activities that require a license. Just because you tell ChatGPT to do something or to not do something, it does not mean that ChatGPT will do or not do that thing. So in this case, if you're really broadly saying, hey, don't do anything that a licensed real estate professional would do, it'll say, okay, but it may not know what you're really talking about. You have to be really explicit in your instructions when you're working with AI. But even then, it may not always follow them, right? There's a randomness to AI. There's also context window length that might affect AI's interactions or what it's going to generate. And so this is something that we have to have a heightened concern about, is making sure that AI is not doing or saying things that a licensed professional should do or say. Now, I'm going to keep looking down here. There's some pretty important stuff that pop up in the prohibited uses. The first thing is using AI to create property descriptions, advertisements, or communications that violate fair housing laws. We need to make sure that it doesn't do that. It says here to see Section 6, and if we go down to Section 6, there is actually a section on fair housing and advertising compliance. And there are a number of things here that it's specifically saying we need to make sure that it does or does not do. There are examples here of prohibited AI-generated content. And even if you were to train your AI not to say or do these things explicitly, it still might create different variations of it. So for example, any one of these statements could easily slip into an AI-generated response. I have like a project where I have like all of the fair housing rules and regulations uploaded as context, as documents. And even then, even though it has that information, it can at times not follow it exactly to a T, and it makes mistakes. It's funny, ChatGPT at the very bottom says something like, ChatGPT makes mistakes. Be sure to check all important information. Well, when you're selling real estate, pretty much all of it is important information when you're using ChatGPT. It's all important. That needs to be a lot larger in ChatGPT and the other AIs. It needs to be like a big blinking banner saying, check everything, because it's important. So these are some good examples for fair housing. Let me go back up here. We've also got here using AI to determine property values for clients without agent review is prohibited use. And I will say that in my own experience in testing AI, in being able to assist in analyzing a property, is that it has a strong tendency to hallucinate. I'll give you an example. I was running a test to see if AI was able to do a good job of taking a specific property address that I was very familiar with and understood the value behind it, and asked it what it was worth and what it thought it was worth, something that maybe a home seller might do, right? And AI generated a very convincing and compelling looking response and, I'll say, evaluation of that home's price. However, when I started to question it, I just asked it, hey, how would you improve on this price if you were going to make improvements? And then immediately it started to check and correct and find the things and mistakes that it had made, including finding inaccurate information that it found and decided to use anyway. So we have to be extra careful whenever we're using AI and using it to like even help us assess a home's value, because it's really important that we don't give ChatGPT or these other tools too much credit into what they're generating. Just because it might appear like it's done some amazing analysis and synthesis doesn't mean it actually has. It's just presenting that information in a very compelling, persuasive way. We also see here that representing AI-generated content as human authored is a big no-no. And I would say that not disclosing AI assistance in any form, in any way, and whatever you're using it for, creates a real problem. I'll give you a few examples here. So the first thing is people tend to discount information when they found out it's made by AI. If you're reading a social media post and all of a sudden you realize there's one of the AI flags in there, you're like, well, wait a minute, this person didn't actually write this. They used AI to make this. One of the telltale signs, for example, is when you hear the words, here's the honest breakdown. Like I've noticed that to be a trend lately with AI. It'll say, here's the honest breakdown. If you see the words honest breakdown in anything, that's really high chance that it was AI generated. Another one is like the reverse negative. It'll say something like, it's not about the policy, it's about how you use AI. Or it might say something like, it's not about what doesn't matter, it's about what does matter. And that particular pattern of phrasing is, for some reason, very embedded within AI. In the early days, it was easy to detect AI because it was using too many M dashes or it was using too many emojis. And now it's actually showing up in the speech pattern recognition. So when you start to see it and you start to see it over and over again, you realize, oh, that's AI. And here's the thing. Once a person detects something that was made by AI, there's this automatic discount to it. It could be something even like a client communication. It could be an analysis that has been conducted, is that we really need to disclose how and where AI was used in any of the things that we're using, because there is a severe tendency to discount it. Another thing that happens is people get distracted from the main message when they start to wonder if something was created by AI. The other day I was watching a show with my son and a commercial popped on, and the commercial had a animal in it doing some dances or something like that. And my son asked, hey, do you think that was AI for that? And I thought, wow, gee, I don't know. I mean, it kind of looks like AI, but it might have been CGI. I don't really know the difference, oftentimes these days. And that's immediately when I realized the company failed, because we're over here talking about whether they use AI or not. I have no idea what the product was. I have no idea what the company was. So the message was lost because we're sitting there wondering whether it was created by AI. You might have a message, and if someone thinks and is wondering whether that was created or modified by AI, you just lost, because now they're thinking about the wrong thing and not your message. Another thing to be aware of is that if a person detects that you are using AI and to communicate with them, they might take a little bit of offense to it. They might say, what, are you too busy to not send me this message yourself, or to write this email yourself, or to write this text message yourself, or to write this direct message yourself? You're using AI to do that. And so there might be some offense taken to it. But I think it's really great that this is noted in the policy, because these are have real consequences for your reputation when you're selling real estate. Since we talked about the fair housing stuff already, I'm just going to drop down to section 7, where it says client communication and chatbots. It says automated AI responses, like chatbots, must not provide legal advice, financial advice, or specific property valuations to consumers. This is very similar to the previous statement when it was talking about agentic AI and not performing the tasks of a licensed real estate professional. Same thing here, right? We can't provide legal advice, financial advice, specific property valuations. And even if you tell AI, or if you tell the chatbot not to do it, that doesn't mean it won't do it. First off, you got to make sure the source of truth that your chatbot is using doesn't have that information in there to borrow from. That really increases the requirements on how you would make an effective chatbot. So it can't just use the internet as training. You need to provide really specific knowledge bases on how it can talk and interact with customers. But it also means that we have to have a really good check and balance system to make sure that it's not doing it, and that we are reviewing to make sure that it's not doing these activities, so that we can then fix and train or retrain these chatbots not to make those mistakes in the future. One of the things that we've done is we've explored the use of chatbots is to have a really heavy training cycle, not to where it's just training on the use, but where we're actually going through and testing it with multiple messages with high volume and lots of different variations to see what kind of output is it producing. And then when we see an output that we don't like, we actually go to the source documentation to make sure that it's not in there somehow embedded. And then the other controls we like to put in place within our chatbots is to make sure that the chatbot is really only using our knowledge bases and not the training data that might be available, because it's going to find all kinds of stuff on how it might advise or communicate or interact as a chatbot to somebody on your website or whatever, however it's being used. And so we don't want it to use its training data. We want to limit the sources of knowledge that it has. But we need to have that check and balance to make sure that it's not doing it and that we can fix it. Okay, moving along to the brand and brokerage integrity section. It says all agents and staff are fully accountable for any AI-generated content they use, share, or publish on behalf of the brokerage. Human review is mandatory before distribution. Ultimately, what this is saying is that you can't blame ChatGPT. You're on the hook. ChatGPT is not going to take responsibility. It's not going to take liability, whether it's ChatGPT or any AI tool. We are the ones who are responsible for our use of it and people's interpretation of that. All right, scrolling down, there's a legal and vendor compliance. I think the last thing here I'm going to zero in on is this agent supervision and training. It says all agents and staff shall receive AI training upon adoption of this policy at least annually thereafter. I would say that you're going to have to train yourself a lot more frequently than annually. There's big changes in AI happening every day or every week, and pretty significant things happening every few weeks. And so making sure that you're using it safely, making sure that you're using it with compliance, make sure you're using it effectively so it's not wasting your time, is going to require that you stay on top of what are the best practices, what are the things that I need to be aware of for compliance. And so that's important. You're going to have to do that more than just annually if you're going to keep up with the speed of change when it comes to AI. There's a glossary here for real estate brokerages. I encourage you to read through this document and scan through it yourself. I'll include a link to this document on the National Association of Realtors website so that you can go download and check it out yourself and see what kind of insights you might gather from it. If you have any thoughts, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please be sure to drop them in the comments section. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel where we share tips and strategies to make real estate tech and AI useful, practical, and profitable. I'll see you in the next video.